All right, so I've started this video for the fifth time. I started recording it and not realizing that I didn't hit record again, and then I was getting towards the end when I noticed that the little red button wasn't on. So if I sound a little agitated, I am. So today's topic of car homelessness is going to be the second time on this channel that I've addressed this issue. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I've been running around the city doing chores, picking up groceries, going to the gym, doing the things that I do on the weekend. And no matter where I go in the city, there is someone living in that parking lot who is treating it as if it were their home. They're sitting in the front seat, indulging in certain things. And that's just the way it's going to be because that's it. That's all they can afford is that car. And there isn't going to be, no one's coming to save them. That's the big takeaway from this video. No one's coming to save you if you have to move into your car. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to transition back into a rundown apartment. And with that said, let's get into the monologue. They tell us they tell us that if we work hard, we'll have a good life. But what happens when a full-time paycheck can't even buy a roof over your head? More and more people are finding out that their real home is the driver's seat of their car, parked behind a Walmart or a 24-hour gym just to have a safe place to sleep. We act like homelessness is some far off problem for other people, but the truth is most of us are just one missed paycheck away from living in a parking lot. Maybe the real question isn't why so many people are ending up here, but why a system that forces full-time workers into their cars is still considered normal. Normalizing all of the problems that aren't real problems for the proletariat has become something our society has really pushed. Low wages, crummy infrastructure, and terrible, terrible cost of housing, regardless of where you are. Where I live, the average cost for a one bedroom apartment is nearly $2,000. And I imagine that within the next couple of years, that's going to be $3,000. Because when I moved into this apartment, it was $500 a month. And somehow, over the last 7 years, they've managed to quadruple the rent for the same crummy apartment with the unbelievable feature of having endless amounts of cockroaches. And it's gross. I walk out into that parking lot or I look out the back window of my apartment, and no matter how many times I look out my window, there's always going to be someone back there that's homeless, or I can see someone living in their car from my kitchen because that's how bad the problem is. In fact, I pulled up today to my normal parking spot in behind my apartment, and there was two guys living in their car uh, about three parking spots over. And it's not like you can't tell that someone's living in their car. Everything that they own is packed into the back seat of that car, and they have things usually strapped to the top of their car that they can't fit inside of it. So I got out of my car and I don't know what they were doing, but obviously they were on some funny stuff because they were both laughing really loud. And I was just like, yep, that's the power of being able to pretend that everything's okay in the face of extreme adversity. Talking point number one: the idea that hard work pays off is starting to sound like a cruel joke. Even when those with steady incomes can't afford stable housing. Oh, I meant to say, when even those with steady income can't afford stable housing. The whole idea of steady income to me is kind of ridiculous. Because if you think of steady income as being one job that pays you enough so that you have the ability to have a stable life, that no longer happens for a large portion of our society. Stable incomes are no longer what you would think that they're supposed to be. Stable income to me is the income that you generate that allows you to be able to do certain normal things. In fact, today, as I was driving back from the sporting goods store, I passed this. building that said Fidelity, the retirement business. And I remember working at the call center, and this crummy minimum wage job, they set you up with a retirement account. And this is what really bothers me about these really low paying jobs, is that they pretend that they're not what they are. At this place, one of the first things that you got was, "Oh, we're going to give you an investment account with Fidelity." And you're like, "What am I supposed to put into my retirement account? I make minimum wage." And they're like, "Well, you need to start thinking about retirement." I'm like, "I make minimum wage. I work in a call center." And that's what I don't get about a lot of these really crummy jobs. Even when you start working at Walmart, they offer to allow you to buy Walmart stock. How is a person working at Walmart going to buy stock in the corporation they work when they qualify for food stamps because they work there? But it was something that they kept pushing on the employees. Buy company stock, make certain that you're saving up. And I think to myself, if a person is struggling that bad where they can barely afford housing and they're not eating regularly, how are you going to pretend that that's a real job? Forcing people, gaslighting people into believing that that crummy job that you took that has really terrible benefits and stock options for minimum wage workers doesn't make it any better. In fact, that was something that I thought about when I first started working at one of these really low end retail jobs, is how the company wanted you to show up to work in a collared shirt with dress pants and that your clothes looked clean. That was part of. I remember reading that in the company handbook. Right, every corporation has a a book of the way of employee standards of what haircuts you can wear, what how long your nails can be, how big your earrings can be. They have a profile of what they want their workers to look like. And coming to work and looking clean, making certain you have a smile on your face, they expected that. And on top of that, you just wondered, how am I supposed to come to work if the uniform at, let's say, a place like Best Buy, which is a notorious minimum wage job, how are you expected to come to work in business casual attire when you make minimum wage? And any manager in any one of these businesses will tell you that's the minimum requirement. So you're telling me that the minimum requirement is that I'm going to have to invest money in my own clothes so that I can meet the standard of a minimum wage job. And the truth is, yes. Yes, you will have to meet that standard. And I thought, this is outrageous. They're dressing you up like a monkey at a job where they throw peanuts at you all day long, and they want you to show up happy as well. Anyhow, moving on to talking point number 2. Parking lots are becoming makeshift neighborhoods, and the only thing keeping many from complete homelessness is four wheels and tinted windows. I kid you not, I had someone that I know yesterday tell me that she needs to get tinted windows for her car as soon as possible because she feels like she's going to be moving into her car soon. And she doesn't want people coming and looking inside of her car while she's trying to sleep. And I thought to myself, wow, tinted windows. And then ChatGPT created this talking point. I always wonder why people wanted super dark windows in their cars. Like, what are you doing in there? Are you driving around in a bang bus, or what's going on in there that you're so secretive about what you're doing inside that you need to have completely blacked out windows? Now I know. Blackout windows are to keep the sun out so that you can sleep inside of your car. Who would have thought? I didn't. But turning parking lots into neighborhoods while people sleep in their cars is a cruel reality of today's world. Is that these people who are working full time but can no longer afford even a rundown apartment are forced to live inside of their vehicles. There was a guy that actually works at Sprouts and lives in his car. Um, and I've seen that car parked there for a very long time, maybe even years. That car's been parked there. It's right next to the car wash. So as you turn at the light and you come into the car wash, it's the last parking spot before you make that left right there towards the car wash. And since I love getting my car washed, I see that car. I would see a few times a week. And I don't think the car even runs anymore. And the person that lives in that car works in that grocery store. And that's how bad it is. Eventually, with all retail jobs, your employees are going to have to move into the space behind the store and live in tents. I remember reading a story that ran on Vice News about a rich business owner who was trying to run a restaurant in a upscale Colorado neighborhood. And the great thing was that there's a lot of interest in those places from very wealthy people. But once those wealthy people show up, the rents go up so that the locals can no longer afford to live in their own towns. And this is something that the the owner has to address. The same thing has happened at Disneyland. Disneyland has has jacked up the prices of attending the park, but the people who live nearby can't afford housing. And when your employees that work at Disneyland, the happiest place in the world, have to take off those costumes and then go sleep in their cars because they can't afford rent. I mean, I don't get it. And where I was going with a rich business owner in Colorado is that she came on to do a segment with Vice News and told the reporter that she was providing her workers housing behind the restaurant to help them out. And I'm like, okay, I can understand if it's transitional housing, but forcing your employees to live in tents behind the restaurant, knowing full well that you don't pay them enough to be able to live in that area. And obviously, if you're paying minimum wage, you're not going to be able to afford to get a car. So at that point, that lady restaurant owner, she's running a plantation, a straight up plantation with tents in the back for all of her plantation wage slaves, which is ridiculous. And she was all smiles, thinking she was doing this great service for her workers. And I thought, you know what? You are going to get roasted by the community that sees this video. Millions of people seeing a rich white lady housing her restaurant workers behind the place in tents. Oh, Lord. Bad idea all the way around. It's not charity, lady. All right. Talking point number 3. The daily struggles of car homelessness, from finding a safe parking spot at night to dealing with extreme weather. Car living comes with constant challenges. One of those challenges is places like I just mentioned. The city of Sedona here in Arizona had to legalize people living in their cars for the exact same reason that I just mentioned. The people, the low level workers that live in Sedona are priced out of housing there. And pricing out poor people out of things is a great way to ensure that they won't be able to afford to stay in the area. And then you're going to have a labor shortage. And this is something that we talked about extensively during the pandemic, as all of these owners of these places were complaining about the federal unemployment benefits, because how are they supposed to compete with living wages, right? You ask a business owner, it's like, how am I supposed to compete with living wages when profit margins are so thin? And I remember them interviewing these owners, and there's one particular one on that was airing on Fox News where a reporter was pushing the mic in his face. It's like, I can't believe they're giving people money to stay home and do nothing when when my restaurant needs people and I need to be rich. So I need to get those people off of federal unemployment benefits and get them back into my restaurant so I can pay them $200 a week so they'll make me rich. Like mentality. Oh my God. And there's so many rich people that think this way. These people that are trying to build $1 million small businesses off the back of minimum wage earners. And then they get angry and say stupid things like, well, we have really high turnover here. No one seems to want to stay. The people that we hire are not very well educated. And you think, well, why would someone who was well educated take a minimum wage job doing a mindless, repetitive thing like landscaping? What, do you want a college degree to cut the grass? I mean, some of these corporations are absolutely ridiculous. When I worked in retail, this was the most common gripe I would hear about the front end manager. It's like, well, no one good ever applies here. Well, guess what? People only that are good only apply to good jobs. When you have a bad job, like a restaurant job, a retail job, a car wash job, or a warehouse job, you're attracting the bottom of the barrel of talent. At my Evil Corp, they've had this problem. They've had to scour the entire country to find more and more salespeople because sales is one of the toughest departments that you have to that you'll ever work in. In fact, I was just talking to the salespeople, and I didn't know this, but the first 3 weeks of being a salesperson, they put you into a mini boot camp with a person that's training you on how they want you to do sales. From the way you approach the customer to the way you close the deal to the way that you use what would I call it? Scare tactics. Use I I don't even know how to put this. Use every trick in the book to get them to sign. And you have to be taught exactly how to do that. And then at the end of the 3 weeks, they give you a 4 hour exam to see if you learned everything that you needed to learn. If you don't pass that exam, you lose your job. And I always wondered why there was such a high turnover rate in the sales department. And that's because you have to pass the training. I believe it's UPS that also does this. The UPS, the delivery people, when you apply to be a driver, you go to an intensive training in like a made up city somewhere out in the on the west side, and you go through this training and they give you a certain amount of training before you have to pass an exam. If you don't pass the training exam, you're done. You get kicked out, you lose your job. And the reason they do this is because everything that they transport can come back and someone will file a claim against them. I've tried to file claims against delivery services so many times and it doesn't work. They always make up an excuse as to why it's not their fault. That's why nearly everything I buy, despite not liking Amazon's treatment of workers, I will always buy it from them because when things get lost, they'll replace it, usually without question. And when you have neighbors like mine, you'd understand when you live in this apartment complex and the post office won't deliver here. If Amazon tries to deliver your package to this apartment complex and you don't, and the item that you ordered is bigger than something that will fit in your mailbox, they'll just hold it at the mailbox place until you come and get it. And there's a big reason for that. And I wanted to segue into this particular topic because I wanted to cover it. When you open your door and your next door neighbor is in a Speedo in a lawn chair, that's the kind of neighborhood this is. And the people that lived there before did the same thing. They'd get their lawn chairs out. And remember, this is a tiny apartment. The sidewalk to get out of your apartment is probably 3 feet wide. And there's just one way down. And sometimes you have really awkward run-ins with your neighbors because of such a small area to work with. And looking out there and seeing a grown man with a giant mustache just sitting there. Like, I gasped when I opened my door and I looked over and I'm like, oh my God, doesn't this guy have any shame? Shame, dignity. It doesn't come with living in a place like this. People that live in places like this behave badly because they don't care. Once you end up sleeping in your car or living in a rundown apartment like this, you just don't care. You start giving less F's about anything that's proper. And that's what's wrong with the proletariat is that we stopped caring about norms, right? A long time ago. It's just not part of our daily life. And before I go today, I just wanted to mention one last thing. I won't get into it. I'm just going to say this out loud. When basic survival requires full time work plus side hustles, not side hustle as in singular, side hustles as in plural. And even that isn't enough. The problem isn't the individual, it's the economy. Imagine that. ChatGPT is actually telling me that you need to have a full time job and as many part time jobs as you need in order to feed yourself. No, you're not thriving. You're surviving on a full time job and as many other side hustles as you can possibly pack into a 24-hour day. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. By the way, if my voice sounds a little hoarse, it's because I've been talking for 60 minutes because I kept screwing up the recording. So this is the final version. The first version I made was the best version, but it got screwed up because I didn't hit the button. So anyhow, I'll talk to you guys next time.